presentation here on YouTube. Thank you for being here. We're going to be waiting for some other guests to come in and sign up. But first, for those of you that are joining, I'd like to introduce you to our live. What we're going to be doing today. Last week, for those that joined last week, I was focused on talking about Diego Velázquez and his techniques. This week, I'm going to be talking about Peter Paul Rubens and some of the techniques that he developed. Now, there's a relationship between both painters. They had contact at some point in Madrid, and Rubens instructs Velázquez to travel to Italy to study the great Venetian masters such as Titian. And some of the techniques that they shared in common originate from Venetian art, and that's what I'm going to be talking today. Now, Rubens develops a style of his own. His palette is more extended than Velázquez, and he's also working in a looser, more colorful manner with forms that are more exaggerated and sort of allied to Mannerist art, the Mannerism of Michelangelo. So I'm going to be talking about these things that are so important. But before I begin, I would like to talk about the references that I'm using. Now, this is really important because I do a lot of research for these materials, and that's what I would like to share here on the channel. I use a lot of references, a lot of scientific journals to figure out some of the materials that are being used by the old masters, and I'd like to share those sources with you so you could research these techniques on your own and find the sources online if you like. One of the most important sources that I use for the information that I use in my paintings and also for the research that I do about materials and techniques is this wonderful publication, and it's the National Gallery Technical Bulletin. Now, this is an amazing wealth of information. I believe they have a website with PDFs for download, and it's an amazing institution with a research department that has done research for about 30 years, probably even longer, 40 years. They've published these amazing publications, and volume number 20 has a technical bulletin fully dedicated to Rubens and Van Dyck and their working methods. So this is what I've been doing research on, and there have other ones such as Caravaggio, Velázquez. There's also a lot of journals that have been published by some of the labs in Europe that are doing restoration on these paintings, and they publish a lot of the results, the chemical analysis of the palettes. So this is a wealth of information because we have a disconnect today with our modern materials on the materials that the old masters were using, and they make a fundamental difference when you're setting up, and trying to understand how these paintings were achieved and the effects and the coloristic effects that were, achieved in the painting. So I'm going to be sharing that information with everyone here today. And again, thank you for joining. I really appreciate the support. I just started this channel about a year ago, and I'm really just trying to assemble a library of techniques that have been lost, and just both in drawing and painting. And I also like to tell you a little bit about some of my other initiatives. I have an Atelier Online that I have set up to train young students, in some of these techniques. So check out the links below. There's a wealth of information too in the channel. I've been doing these videos little by little. So it'll take me a while to compound all this information, but I really appreciate the support and you coming here today. For those of you that join me from the Udemy channel, thank you. And this is a compliment to the classical drawing course that you have been taking on Udemy. Also, I'd like to do a Q&A at the end. I'm here to answer any questions, technical questions, whether it be for dedicated to drawing or painting. So stick around and ask questions, and let's engage and see what comes out of this, right? So, okay, so let's just go ahead and begin. And I have here a copy that I've done from early Rubens. And I want to talk about how I set this copy up. I'm going to be talking about how this is an early painting that he did while he was in Rome. Now, Rubens spent 8 years, approximately 8 years in Italy, studying the great masters, especially the Venetian masters. Now, he's coming from the Flemish tradition of painting. He was trained in the north. And Flemish style, the Flemish style of painting, it's a very exacting style. It's a style that uses transfer drawing. It's very colorful and also very precise. The forms are rendered with a lot of detail. And Rubens was, not a stranger to that. He had been trained by a master that would have taught him that style. When he comes to Italy, he is suddenly confronted by a looser style, a style that was based on drawing with the brush. And last week I talked about how Velázquez also adapted this style of drawing with the brush. So these artists were being trained with a lot of great draftsmanship skills to be able to transfer the drawings, to be able to work directly from life with the brush on the canvas. And Rubens was not unique to that. I mean, there's a lot of other painters that were working in that style by the 17th century. Now, prior to that, painters during the Renaissance were transferring drawings, reinforcing the drawing with the ink, and then coloring in and doing these underpaintings. So by the time that Rubens was working in Velázquez, that style had been abandoned for the most part, and artists were working very freely in what the Italians call la gran manera. Now, this is it's an important development, and it was spearheaded by Titian. Now, what it really involves a color ground, okay, to facilitate the heightening of light masses, okay, and also applying the dark masses. And in this painting, I just want to share with you the technique that I used. Rubens used, this is now the original painting is on paper, and he prepared the paper with perhaps some sort of glue sizing so the oil would not attack the fiber of the paper and rot it away. Oil is acidic by nature, and it will rot the fibers of linen or of paper. So you always have to prepare the linen support or the paper support. In the old days, it was done with rabbit skin glue, and that's what I've done here. This is just some mat board, okay? It has been sized, and then I have put a ground of chalk and glue and sanded, and then a gray imprimatura, and then finally a very warm grayish imprimatura on top. So it's got a double imprimatura, and I observed something similar to this in the sketch. So now for this sketch, I used a very limited palette, and when Rubens was working in Italy, he would have been exposed perhaps to the work of Caravaggio that was working with more limited palettes, and this is a painting that resembles more of a Caravaggesque style, but he evolves out of that style and starts using lighter colors and also cooler colors in his grounds. And by the time that he becomes a mature painter, he starts working on a gray ground. This is a gray ground. This is a linen canvas, and I have prepared this canvas exactly according to some of the chemical analysis, just as an experiment to find out what type of ground this type of support yields. So in the chemical analysis, they always find this is a piece of linen, okay, and it has been prepared with rabbit skin glue, sized, obviously stretched over a stretcher bar, and the first layer has been prepared with an earth red ochre, and also a bit of chalk, okay? Now, for the second layer, they find a gray priming in most of his paintings. They find lead white, chalk, umber, and some sort of black carbon black or bone black, but I suspect that it was mostly vine black. And why was he doing this? Why the two layers, the two different, the gray and the earth? Well, he was probably interested in a very smooth ground, and the linen has the threads of the texture of the canvas. So most likely he was applying the ground, and this I applied this with a palette knife. So I scraped on the red ochre on the support. Okay, let it dry thoroughly for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then I applied the gray ground, rich in lead white and calcium carbonate chalk, and it yields a very, obviously with the umber and the vine black, it yields a very smooth, sort of somewhat absorbent but not too absorbent ground, and it's a wonderful ground the paint just goes on it so beautifully. So as you're working with these materials, you discover the reasons that they were doing this. So the earth ground is just really to fill the weave of the canvas, and then the gray ground is to just make it smooth and to create a beautiful tone for the colors to come, to show up and be able to work with light passages, right? So when you experiment, you create, when you recreate some of these techniques, you begin to see why they were using a lot of these materials. Nowadays, we use just lead white with perhaps chalk, and we stain the canvas. But in the days of Rubens, this gray ground would have proved to be very useful in working directly on the ground from a model. And this is the portrait that I'm going to be working with today, is a portrait of his daughter. So most likely he was working from life and she was moving around, so he really wanted to get some fast results with this ground. So it's a very, very quick technique. You could just apply a very quick underpainting, which is what most likely he was using. And I want to show you the painting here. It's a wonderful portrait of his daughter, okay? And indeed, it has a gray ground that has been left exposed, okay? And he's just dragging the white, barely covering the surface to create a turbid medium effect, that optical gray, okay? Now, I want to talk about the palette, and then you can see where, and you could look this painting up on the internet, is the portrait of his daughters, okay, one of his daughters. And he leaves the drawing exposed, and the drawing just seems to be a sort of an umber color with perhaps a little bit of black, similar to what Velázquez would have been using. Very schematic drawing, and he just goes ahead and finishes just the head, and then look at how the gray just creates this atmosphere, and he almost doesn't have to finish it. It's almost like an oil sketch. So this is a wonderful technique. Now I want to talk about the colors and the palette real quickly, because it's important to consider how different the palette is from Velázquez paintings, especially his early paintings. Last week we used a very limited palette to talk about some of the flesh tones, okay? And this is a more extended palette, almost like a full palette. And I just want to talk about each individual color because it makes a fundamental difference. And you've probably heard about these colors, and a lot of these colors you could find in Kramer pigments or natural pigments. They're wonderful places to get these historical colors. A lot of painters are not using these colors anymore because they are very costly. And working with them is difficult. I mean, you have to really understand how they behave. They don't all behave the same like the commercial paint that we buy. I prepare all these colors, and I even make some of the pigments. This lead white, I paired up 2 lead whites. I have a commercial lead white from a very well-known manufacturer, and then my own lead white that I make using the old stack process method, taking sheets of lead and exposing them to vinegar vapors over a bed of manure, and it results in an amazing white that has different properties. The working properties of this white, although not as white as the modern counterpart, and that is a well-documented fact, the modern lead white is much whiter The crystalline structure is different. So, but this results in an amazing material to creating pastos and textures. Now, I have used walnut oil, heat-bodied walnut oil, to mold this pigment in its stone and create this beautiful, gorgeous pigment that will yield some amazing results, beautiful luminosity. Next to that is the Lenten Yellow, which is a yellow that was used during the 17th century, very popular. Velázquez used it, Vermeer used it, Rubens used it, a number of 17th century masters used it, including also some Renaissance painters such as Raphael. And it's essentially lead white heated to create red lead and mixed with tin oxide at a specific temperature. Now, specific temperatures will yield different shades of yellow. This one in particular is a dark shade, but you could get a very subtle lemon shade. And Vermeer, in particular, was using this type of very pale Lenten yellow. It's a wonderful color. When you mix it with lead white, it yields a color that is just absolutely gorgeous. And I'm gonna, this is the stack process lead white with a little bit of tin yellow. And just look at what a beautiful subtle yellow that yields. It's gorgeous. Okay, so this is a pigment that is evident in the painting that I'm going to be copying, and Rubens is documented as using this pigment all over his paintings. So I've included it in the palette, and I'm mentioning it because for those of you that are interested in Rubens and his techniques, this is a key color. So moving on, so the traditional yellow ochre, which is a color that you find in just about every European painting from the 17th to the 19th centuries, and even in contemporary painters. With contemporary painters, they use the yellow ochre. Okay, it's a wonderful color. It's permanent. It's just a rich color, and mixed with Lenten yellow yields some beautiful colors, shades of yellow. So yellow ochre. Right next to that is raw sienna, Italian raw sienna, which is a wonderful color. Is transparent. Here you have two opaque yellows, and then here's the transparent yellow. And that's something that I've noticed in Rubens' palette. He seems to have used the opaque yellows, and then he has the transparent earth yellow, the opaque reds, and then he has a transparent red, and the same thing with the darker colors. So it's that the reason he's doing that is because he's working with transparent passages in the shadows. So he's using those translucent colors to create transparent shadows, translucent shadows, right? So Italian raw sienna, this one in particular is Mount Amiata raw sienna from Kramer Pigments. And right next to that is Venetian red. It's very different from the Spanish Tierra de Malaga, which we discussed last week. This one in particular is much more warmer, richer, and wonderful for flesh tones. Mixed with a vermilion, this is genuine vermilion, will yield some amazing reds. Right next to that is the Madder Lake. Now this color is very special, and Rubens used it extensively. This one in particular, the Spaniards use carmine, which comes from the cochineal insect, but this one comes from the madder root, which is a plant that is native to Northern Europe, and when prepared in a specific sequence, you could extract the purpurine, which is the material, the coloring substance that will yield this beautiful color. And also the alizarin. There's alizarin and there's purpurine. So depending on the modern day alizarin is a variation of that, but it really doesn't have the depth of this color. So there's a variation on that. So moving on, brown ochre. Okay, you could also use raw umber, which is just an amazing cooler type of brown. And then we have here vine black, bone black. Now Rubens and a lot of the northern painters such as Rembrandt, Vermeer, they seem to favor the bone black. Now the Spaniards and the Italians seem to favor more vine black. I suspect that Rubens used both. they yield different rays. So that's why you would use both. And now moving on to this column right here, there's some really interesting stuff going on here, and these colors are vital to this painting that I'm going to be copying. Now this is azurite, and the azurite is a difficult color to use. You can't grind it very finely because it loses the intensity. So most painters from the 17th century, most treatises, mention the use of azurite in a specific sequence. So for example, it has to be mixed on the palette. It can be ground very finely, and it's usually carried with lead white, meaning that the lead white will make it behave. Otherwise, it's just dry and it's just. Pacheco mentions the use of spike oil of lavender, which I mentioned last week, to make it flow. Otherwise, it's really, really grainy. It's very hard to use. So a lot of painters just give up on it. And by the 19th century, painters just abandoned this very difficult color, and it becomes replaced by cerulean blue. Okay, the cerulean blue is more intense. It behaves better. So the Impressionists would have not have been using azurite. They would have been using cerulean blue and cobalt blue. So now I have mixed here a green, which Rubens seems to have used this sort of greenish tones in the flesh, and this is common of Velázquez and Rubens. They would mix the Lenten Yellow and the azurite to create this beautiful mint green, and this will harmonize perfectly with the vermilion. It creates sort of a complementary color. So this is the palette. Now there's another color, Steel the Grain. It's fugitive. It's documented that a lot of the painters from the north used it, but it has faded now in a lot of the paintings. And I don't use it. I don't recommend painters using it because it really is just, I mean, there's whole passages that look blue in paintings when they're supposed to be green, and it's because the Steel the Grain is just one of the most fugitive colors. But in shadows, it has been preserved well, and it would have been mixed with a madder lake to get sort of a burnt sienna-ish color. It doesn't have the permanence of burnt sienna, but it was used in some passages. There's also indigo, and I have a color here that is very special, lapis lazuli. Okay, and this is Afghanistan lapis lazuli. It hasn't been prepared in the Cennino way, which is extracting it with sort of a plastiline made out of resin to purify the color, but it's very similar. Okay, so this is the palette that I'm going to be using. Again, if you have any questions. Now, what I'm going to do in this demonstration is I'm going to set up the drawing, teach you how to set up the drawing, and create just a working sequence. Now, this painting doesn't really exhibit an monochromatic underpainting, meaning I don't really see a grisaille used. Now, Rubens develops a grisaille technique for a lot of his more finished commissions. This is more of a sketch. It's a portrait of his daughter. It's a young girl. She's moving around, and he most likely wanted a very quick technique to just get the proportions on there, the color on there. So it seems to me like an alla prima painting with a full palette. And that's why I chose this painting. Now his more finished works have a grisaille, okay, which is black and white, and then the color is applied on top. That's sort of the technique that I used here. I painted this monochromatic first using raw umber and white, and then I heightened the painting wet into wet with red, with accents of red, and it creates a warm, cool relationship that is unique to his work, and it really makes the flesh just seems three-dimensional. So, but the painting of his daughter seems to have a different technique, and now this is important because he would have learned this technique from the studies of a lot of the Venetian painters, Caravaggio as well. The Caravaggio used a grisaille technique. So Rubens seems to adapt this technique, and at times he uses a warm brownish grisaille, which is, I believe that the French call it a brunelle, which is a brownish grisaille, and then the grisaille, which is just a black and white. It yields a cooler color. So you could experiment with those two techniques and harmonize the paintings with a different approach. Okay, so let's just go ahead and if there's any questions, I could answer any questions you have. But if not, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the brushes. Okay. Now, the brushes that I have been using to copy Rubens are mostly sables. And Rubens is a wealthy painter. He was very successful during his lifetime. He ran a very prosperous studio with many assistants and some key figures like Anthony van Dyck. And a lot of research has come about his stroke and the quality of his line work. And recently, there's been research about the brushes. And this surface is very smooth, so the sable brushes are very appropriate for this surface. And I'm going to go ahead and establish the drawing with not quite a very big, thick brush like this, although I will use this for the background. But the more linear aspects of the drawing, I'm going to resolve with mongoose hair brush, which Velasquez also was using. Okay, and this brush is smooth, but it's not too smooth that you will destroy the brush. So, but for the most part, it's going to be sables. Okay, and these are high quality sables. Okay, these are from Skoda. And I recommend a range of sizes. The large sables are very expensive. So a brush like this, you have to really take good care of it, because if not, you will lose it in a heartbeat. So I keep these brushes wet with olive oil once I finish painting with them, and they keep point. So, but all right, so let's just go ahead and begin. Now I'm going to use the fresco brush just to set up initial blocks and then the linear elements. Now, Rubens would have been using a medium that would have allowed him to work in a more linear style. I have seen evidence of some very fine lines in his paintings. Now, they're not traced lines, they're drawn with the brush, clearly, but there are lines nevertheless. So let's just go ahead and talk about some of the mediums that he would have been using, right? So one of the things that I do when I work on my paintings, and this is taken from a lot of the sources that I've been reading, I don't use solvent on my brushes. I use linseed oil. Okay, this is just regular refined linseed oil, and in this jar I just continue to clean the brushes, and something magical happens. The sediment of the pigment settles at the bottom, and the the oil gets thicker. And I found that if you mix, this is sort of a drying polymerized oil, very similar to Stan oil. All the metals of the sediment are creating a catalyst. They act as a catalyst, and they make the oil just dry quicker. So if you could quite literally use this oil with a little bit of spike oil to set up the drawing, especially if you want a finer line. Okay. Now, for the most part, I've been using just spike oil, but in this case, I'm gonna switch to a little bit of spike oil and a tiny bit of oil, just to give more of a clear line. Okay. So now another medium that Rubens, real quick. This is walnut oil that I bought from Kramer Pigments. And this oil has been boiled with red lead and litharge. These are traditional dryers, historical dryers. And this oil that results is just perfect, mixed with a little bit of spike oil. This is in the chemical analysis in the National Gallery Technical Bulletin. They indeed find this very material in Van Dyck's whites. Okay. Now in Rubens, on the other hand, they find heat-bodied linseed oil, and this one I bought from Natural Pigments, and it's the same concept. Lead white, litharge, but the oil is linseed oil instead of walnut oil. And it's consistent with what they find. A lot of linseed oil, heat bodied, meaning the oil's boiled, so it goes through a chemical change, and they could detect the, the, the preparation of the oil, right? Now, there's something very strange in the glazes in Rubens' paintings, and it's the use of some sort of pine resin. This is large turpentine, okay? It's a resin. Now, this is where I differ a little bit. They find this in tiny, tiny amounts, and if you mix a medium composed of this with a little bit of heat-bodied oil and a little bit of spike oil, you could get some very, very translucent glaze, a beautiful glaze medium. Now, it could become detrimental to your paintings if you abuse the resin. It could crack the shadow passages. And the reason that they were using this is because there are some pigments that were very difficult dryers. For example, the Madder Lake is a difficult dryer. So by mixing a little bit of resin, a little bit of heat body oil, it makes it dry very quickly, and you could glaze on top in a matter of a couple days. If you don't use these materials, it will take longer to dry. So they were really overcoming a lot of the defects, the pigments, by using different combination of the oil, the resin, which they don't find in the light passages or in the opaque paints, only in the glaze passages. Okay, and they also find heated pine materials. What does that mean? So that very pine resin could be cooked and burned, and it turns into a sort of a tar. They call it tar pitch, and that could be used as a glazing material as well. And they find that, indeed, they find that in some of the brown glazes. So, all right, let's just go ahead and begin, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and begin with the traditional underpainting setup that I've been working with. Now, this is just, again, a very quick demonstration. And I'm going to be using a little bit of oil, okay, mixed with spike oil of lavender to establish just a general drawing. I'm going to use the brown ochre, okay, and a little bit of black to create this sort of umber, dark umber color, okay, similar to what he was using. Okay. And now that my reproduction is, this painting, this is the original size, is 10 inches wide by 14 high, and this canvas is much larger. So what I'm doing is I'm just keying in and working just in the center to work at the same size. Okay, so let's just go ahead and start getting some basic marks on there. And I am going to start with the big brush, but only to set up a very light outline. And children portraits are not easy. They're very difficult. And, well, they move a lot. So now, some of the head is just, it's really outside the picture plane here. And that really gives the composition a nice compression. Okay. Now, one thing I've noticed with a lot of painters today use sort of a French style by using straights. And this is a system this is a new development. Most of the traditional painters were not using that system. That's a French academic method. Now, Rubens, you can see that he was just very freely, more of an Italian style painter. He did spend 8 years in Italy, and his approach would have been more of an Italian style of drawing, like Leonardo da Vinci, using the ovals, right? So I'm just setting up here some basic proportions. And I am going to use my calipers. I always use my calipers when I'm doing a copy because I don't want to stray too far from their proportions that I'm observing. I just begin with a very, very schematic drawing, and from there I just almost staining the canvas. Okay. Once I have that, I'm going to switch to my sable brush. The sable brush will help me draw, and that's there. You can see where I could do more of an outline. Rubens was quite linear in his approach. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just really imagining this beautiful outline. And I mean, I see that he does that in a lot of his paintings. He does more of a line, beautiful line. I mean, he's just an amazing draftsman. And I will start correcting my proportions in a little bit. For now, I just want to get some basic blocks of shade on here. Okay. And I'm just really picking out the shadow shapes. Okay. Not interested in the detail at all, just shadow shapes. Okay. This is a wonderful ground to work with. It just takes the paint so beautifully. It just makes it sit right on the canvas. It absorbs it slightly, but it'll be perfect for setting up some blushes paint. And I could see why he was using this surface. I mean, he was perhaps interested in very sort of enamel quality to his paint. Now, this is an alla prima painting, meaning that it's probably a one session or two session painting. He probably finished it from his imagination. I can't imagine. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and I can't even get her to pose. So I can't imagine, anybody, any child posing for very long. I'm picking out some darks here, just to set up. And this would have been probably one of the most important aspects of the painting process, just setting up the drawing and getting things to work right away. Now I am scrubbing the paint, and this is something that was probably not done very much. These type of artists that were more with the tip of the brush, just working a lot of this detail. Sort of like an ink drawing. Okay. I'm going to stain these shadow shapes. This will help me greatly to get this set up. Now the gray is really creating a beautiful tone that when you mix the flesh tones, you really could just leave that gray intact. And that's the reason that they were using this this ground, because they could work very quickly. So, and right now I'm just staining the canvas. I mentioned last week that Velázquez used the same technique. The Spaniards call it manchar. Okay, it's just a wonderful technique, very economical. Okay, so let's just go ahead and measure some of these proportions to make sure that I am in the right path with the proportions, okay? And I want to make sure that I don't stray too far. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. And this is important to do when you're working from model. I always take my proportions. Okay. Let's take my set up the proportions in a sort of objective way. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Once I have some basic placements, I could start, I'm going to switch to a finer brush and just start developing my drawing further, right? This will really help me because once you have the drawing set up, you could start applying your flesh tones right away. So, and again, you could find a lot of reproductions on the internet to be able to copy some of these amazing works. Go ahead and mix a little bit more medium. Now, one of the things that will happen in warm weather is that the rumber and the spike oil will really react, and you'll get some quick drying. So, especially now that the summer's here, it's important to take that into account. Just setting up this drawing so I could go ahead and punch this painting with some light passages. Show you how Rubens would have, theoretically, would have worked some of these passages, right? I like to stain the canvas freely and then from there refine it. Just getting the basic shapes. It's almost like an ink drawing that you're doing. Okay? Just getting the shapes organized of shade, light and shade planes. Excuse me. Yeah, just the shade planes initially, and then the light planes. For now, okay. And this is probably the hardest part out of the whole process, because you're setting up the drawing. You have to, if you're working from a child that's moving around, well, imagine the struggle. I mean, you're probably fighting with the model the whole time, and asking the model not to move. I've done portraits of my daughter, and she is a wonderful model, but sometimes it is just downright difficult. So it's a very schematic drawing. And I will have a chance to tighten up the drawing in a little bit. Right now, I just want to get it approximately in the right place. Okay? And punch it with a little bit of darker color, a little bit. Okay? You're filling out where the drawing is going to, for the most part, be. And intensifying the darks. As you work, you get more deep, richer darks. And why is that important? Well, when you begin to lay in the lights, if you set up the darks really beautifully, well, you just have to work the lights. So that's what I want to do here. I want to invest time setting up the darks, so I don't really have to go back to them. That's now something wonderful happens, and it's that the medium starts settling, and you have more control. So at first, the medium is not allowing you to become very, very precise, which is a good thing, essentially. And as the medium dries, and you get more control. So use it like essentially like a wash, ink wash. I'm using I have a rag here that will help me clean the brush. That's important. Once you begin to loosen up, painting is always a struggle to get that right consistency, but once you begin to loosen up, then you really start making decisions, and that's where you want to get to initially. That's not easy. That's what I'm trying to do here. Trying to get some darks. Let's see, I have a question. Oh, thank you, Miguel. Thank you for coming by. That's great. Yeah, it's fun to be among other artists that appreciate the knowledge, and especially it's hard earned, It's been many years that I've been painting and doing research, and it's always great to find like-minded artists that enjoy the knowledge, and it's just creating that community. It's just really wonderful, So that's the reason that I shared the channel on YouTube, because I really wanted to get that Let's see. Ah, Ramon, gracias. Thank you. Yeah, it's I love Spanish painting, pintores españoles, and it's such a rich history. And you know, Spain during the 17th century has one of the richest literary cultures, and that's overlooked sometimes. And I mean, when you read El Arte de la Pintura by Francisco Pacheco, you begin to see how amazing. I mean, he was such an intellectual, So it's good to revisit that knowledge and to bring it to light again. So I really enjoy, and I really enjoy the community, of artists and other like-minded painters that are converging here on the channel. That's really wonderful. Um, so it's thank you for coming by, Ramon. That's just really appreciate the comments. Let's see. Yeah, Miguel, I'm here to answer any questions. And let's see. Oh, at the end, we could do a full. What I'll do is I'll stop painting in the end, and I'll do a whole forum of questions. We could talk shop for a little bit. Love to see how you guys find about the channel and where you're coming from, and it's be wonderful. So, but yeah, so I'm. And again, thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. I would like to do a library, at some point of. That's what I really intend to do, a library of techniques. Especially what I'm doing is I'm taking a lot of the techniques that were documented by the old masters and just documenting them in video form here, so painters could have access to that. So, okay, so again, fixing the drawing here and getting a tighter drawing with more control. Now the medium's starting to set. My uh, thickened oil from my brushes, I have mixed this oil with um, my spike oil of lavender, which Pacheco mentions, and is similar to turpentine but not as toxic. Now Rubens we have not been using, and now look what I'm going to be using here. This is a key material or tool to help me get the drawing more correct. Okay, I could essentially draw with this. Okay, now I don't want to tighten up the drawing quite yet, but I do want to get the placement correct. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and again, when you look at Velázquez paintings, Velázquez is a lot looser. He really doesn't do as much. His drawing seems to be quicker, more understated. Rubens seems to be more very objective type of drawing. That's what I'm trying to do here. So, although not detailed at all, but just the placement is correct. So that's what I'm aiming for. I'm switching to a finer brush dipped in oil, and it will help me just get more of the linear qualities, especially of the eye, placement of the eye. Okay, that seems to be pretty good. Seems to be pretty good too. And again, I could go through any round of fixing up later on. This is just to get the, just a basic um, placement of where things are going to go. Okay. Okay. I usually like to resolve the drawing problems with just paint, but right now I'm just trying to really go for Rubens' style and how he achieved some of these passages, So, and just imagining how he worked some of these drawing issues. So, And every artist had their working method. So let's see. Rubens' time is very linear. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight just the mouth, the eyes, and the nose. And then from there, I'll approach the whole thing in a looser way, the rest. Right. Probably won't do much more than tighter drawings. I won't do a tight drawing. This I'll just go straight through the modeling and resolve some of these issues in the modeling. Okay. Just go ahead and place. Now the medium that's on the surface is going to help me too move the paint. That's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to loosen up and with a larger brush and start drawing a little bit more boldly, which seems to be the case with Rubens. He drew sort of in a bold style. Seems like he used a large brush. This will help me. Once I have some placement here. I'm going with that black. Now, one thing that I'm going to do during the demonstration is really set up the flesh tones with using the azurite and the Lenten Yellow, so you can see how he employed that green. The green is really important. It's a green. Let's see. And just come for these blocks. There's a block here as well. Okay. All right, so I'm not going to tighten up the drawing much more than that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and start laying in some of the flesh tones so you can see how this all works. Now, but you could probably imagine a drawing that is probably a little bit more tighter or objective than this, but perhaps not. Okay, let's just go ahead and get to the flesh tones. So you can see how the Lenten Yellow and the azurite would have been working. And I've used the azurite before, and it's just wonderful. The flesh is very subtle blue. Rubens left a lot of the underpainting exposed in the shadows, and I'll probably do that. Okay, so to mix the flesh tones, I'm going to go ahead and take the white, mix it with the Lenten Yellow. Okay. And I'm going to create this vermilion. I'm going to bring the vermilion on there and create this sort of pinkish color. Okay. And this immediately you start seeing, I just already see some of the flesh tones that are very similar. And indeed, this palette, so would yield. Look at what a beautiful flesh tone that gives the Lenten with that vermilion. It's wonderful. And as I move on to the halftones, I'm bringing in the darker red. Okay. And I'm going to mix a little bit of white, a little bit of this green, and bring it onto the flesh right there. And you begin to see a neutralization of the color. Okay, it's a wonderful color. That's Azurite and Lenten Yellow. Okay, and it gives you this amazing green that he seems to have used in some of his passages. Now I'm going to go and mix the raw umber and the white towards the shadow. Okay. I'm going to go the same combination and raw sienna and a little bit of black to create that sort of earthy green. And I'm just going with earth green, sort of like an earthy green for the shadows, and a lighter, more prismatic green for the lights. And it seems to use the steam all over the painting. Now I can even go with the yellow, a little bit of yellow ochre and black. Even bring in a little bit of azurite into that shadow color. I could just work all these colors. You get a full range of flesh tones, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test out some of these flesh tones and start applying them with sable brushes. I'm not going to use the, I'm going to just go ahead and use the sable, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and begin with some of these pinks. There's no underpainting here, okay? Seems like Rubens just attacked this with just color. I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna start with a greenish color first, and then put the red color on top. So I'm gonna go ahead and mix more green color with azurite and the Lenten Yellow. Okay. This color is really wonderful. It's just, but I need a lot of it to get it to be able to paint quickly. Okay. All right, so there it is. Look how neutral that color is. And I'm gonna go ahead and just apply this. This will become like almost like an under layer, okay? That will allow me to resolve the cool colors underneath, and then the lighter colors on top. And one of the things that I found out with azurite is the azurite wants to be painted thickly, because if you don't paint it thickly, it's too grainy on the canvas. So you really want to put a lot of painting on there. Okay, a lot of paint on there initially. I'm going for that shadow, cool shadow color. I'm painting in patches, okay? Patches of diluting just a tiny bit. That green color, it turns to form. I'm going to approach first. And indeed, he has this amazing greenish color that I love, this flesh. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay it freely. Let's have the accents of red, which is right here in the cheek, and he turns the form with that green color. It seems like he did it just straight. He tacked the painting a la prima, just patches of paint. Now, it's important to work these paintings for at least 8 hours. You know, I mean, if you're copying works, master paintings, you know, they're probably 2 sessions, and you know, just it takes time just to get the color on there. You know, you can't work these paintings in, you know, just an hour or 2 hours. You know, it's really, it will require, you know, a considerable amount of effort to get the color, just to get the color on there. And there I'm hitting the painting with a reddish color. It's an accent, okay? And now I'm going for the yellowish color, yellowish warmish color. Okay. And the gray ground really helps you along. Okay, let's just go ahead. This Lenten Yellow with lead white and the ochre really gives you a beautiful green. Wonderful. But the paint is difficult to move. I'm finding out it's because it's so grainy, the ochre, but it also gives you an amazing texture, which I could see in the painting by Rubens. So once you have enough paint on there, you'll be able to move it. And Rubens is known for his use of color. He was a colorist. And he didn't use limited, I mean, in some sketches he has limited palettes, but for the most part he wouldn't have been using too much of a limited palette like Velázquez, because he was interested in the ideas of color. And it's an important aspect to remember about his work, right? Just hiding this planes. I'm going with the form here, just applying the paint. Trying to work as quickly as possible. The idea initially is to get enough paint on there to just be able to move it. And obviously, so the paint's in the right planes. You know? Now, he has some very strong color here on the cheeks, which is important to address. But I'm going to just go ahead and try to work as quickly as I possibly can to be able to establish this and show you how the gray ground really will give you some beautiful effects. I'm going to switch to a large sable brush to be able to work much quicker. So our life is not that long, so I want to be able to get at least some effects of rotation here. There we go. So I'm switching to a very large sable brush. And this sable brush really is an amazing tool. I mean, you can paint very quickly with it, work with some large passages, and probably Rubens was using something similar to this. All right, so let's just, and it gives you a very smooth surface. So let's just go ahead and attack this with some color. I see a lot of green here on the edge. Now, neutralizing this color is the difficult part. This is probably one of the most important things when you're working, learning to neutralize the color. And the advantage of working with a brush like this is that you really could work very quickly, very, very quickly. That's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to work very quickly, or at least try to work very quickly. With just straight color on the surface right over the gray ground. Heighten, work very boldly, heightenings of light. And that's the beauty of the gray ground really allows you to do that. I mean, I could imagine this child ready to move, Rubens stressing out. He wanted to get his painting working. So probably he was just telling him to sit still the whole time. So, and you know, he's an amazing draftsman. I mean, he's like one of the best draftsmen in the history of art. So he probably was making short work of this drawing and, you know, not really struggling too much, but dealing with a child is never easy. So he probably would have been, you know, very concentrated in his task at hand. And right now I have a very bright color here. I'm going to switch to, I'm going to go to a darker green. To do that, I'm going to go azurite, raw sienna, and a little bit of black. And this will give me a very sort of green, wonderfully greenish color. I'm going to dip just a tiny bit. I find myself dipping in some oil to move the paint. By the way, if you don't have large sable brushes, they're amazing. They're really good. Set up a paint, allow you to set up a painting very quickly. They carry a lot of paint. This brush is very expensive, but it's worth every penny that I paid for it. You could blend the colors, you could, you know, you could draw with it. Do a little bit of drawing, speaking of that. It's a very rich palette. And I'm going with a sort of, let's see, with this greenish color that I love. I love the raw sienna color. I put it right there. Third contour, for those of you that have taken my course on classical drawing, the third contour is so important. I went with a little bit of madder lake, a little bit of raw sienna, with the shadow color. It's warmish color. It's typical of a lot of his paintings. He's using the let's go with a plain light one. Fuse some of these colors together. so much fun. We're copying these old painters. Just so able. And it's humbling. Let's do some drawing here. And with that brush, I could quite literally just do some beautiful transitions as well. I could begin to work some other transitions. Hit this color. And when you use historical colors, they're just so subtle. I mean, when you could paint such amazing subtlety. You do not need to neutralize the color like you do with more traditional, or excuse me, the more contemporary colors. That Lenten really is a nice color. And I'm going to go for another round of building up the thicker. Now, Rubens painted with body. He was the lights. His lights are their body. They're not pen paint. They're thickly painted. And I've noticed that. I mean, when I study his paintings, I always notice how the paint in the lights just really has a lot of impasto. So that's what I'm doing here. Go ahead and take a little bit of blue, mix it with raw sienna, and hit this green on the edge just to turn that plane. That's a very subtle green on the edge there. And at some point, very soon, I'm going to correct the drawing on there. Right now, I'm just setting it up. And look how I'm using the ground, the gray ground, to really help me set up the cool tones on the eye. It's the beauty of the... Now, this eye I may have to correct in a little bit. Right now, I'm just setting it up. So the more Lenten Yellow, more light passage over here. One of the things that I really enjoy about the use of a gray ground is that you don't have to fight the ground as much as you do when you work on it. For example, a very dark brown, you have to fight it. And this is just very intuitive. It's pretty straightforward. So now let's work on the nose plane a little bit. We use these dark, these very quick accents of red around the nose. Absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to clean my brush. It's gotten a little dirty. And now I'm going to go ahead and work on the drawing of the eyes just to set that up with the dark and the drawing of the nose. I'm going to use dark color such as umber and dark lake color. Okay, with a little bit of oil just to get the paint to flow. And this will really help me establish the drawing of the eyes. drawing of the nose as well, too. Again, sable brushes will really help you achieve a lot of that subtlety. And she's got these gorgeous eyes. It's a wonderful portrait. This reminds me of my daughter when she was a baby. I've seen her many times. And I just see so much love in this portrait, you know? It's just really uncanny. Just to see how Rubens just really captures this wonderful portrait of his daughter. I'm going to work here on the outline a little bit, although I'm going to eventually lose the outline. Okay. Work on the expression of that eye. Again, you could go through too many rounds, so many rounds of just the drawing, fixing the drawing, getting the drawing just right. Let's come over here. Just a little bit of drawing right there. And I'm going to go back to the drawing around here. Just two. All right. And now I'm going to bring out a little bit of detail in the eyes, just for the sake of getting the portrait sort of on the road. I would probably be more exacting with drawing. I want to demonstrate how I would approach it. And I'm going to bring out just a little bit of passage of light there. Okay. And let's just bring out more subtlety. This green color is really wonderful. The green color that he achieves with the azurite and the Lenten Yellow is just really, really good. He uses it in a very subtle way underneath the eyes. Now that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to mix a little bit of, I'm going to mix white and black to create sort of a grayish tone. So it seems like he used this grayish tone underneath. Now again, I want to thank everyone for coming by the channel and supporting the channel, you know, and subscribing. It's really wonderful. It's good to see that there's other painters out there interested in traditional techniques. Yeah, so if you were to do a grisaille, how in depth would you go the rendering process? Would the contrast of lights and darks be very developed and strong, or would it be more of a sketch? That depends, Miguel. It depends on you. You could see that Rubens in some paintings that did almost a finished painting in grisaille, and in some of his sketches, he just seems to do a very quick, very general underlayer in black and white, and then he just hits it with color. Possibly in this painting, he wouldn't, probably was a painting directly from a model from his daughter, and I don't envision that he would have done a very developed grisaille, because the painting has a lot of movement. It feels like she's about to stand up, and it's painted very boldly but very finely at the same time. So it doesn't seem like other paintings that he does where there's you could see that it was multi-layered. It seems like maybe 2 layers hidden with some highlights in the second layer. So it sort of depends. Like if you study a painter like Caravaggio in his commissions, paintings that would have been taken a long time, multi figures, that seems appropriate, like a very finished Versailles layer. But in a portrait painting of a child, probably he would have not done a fully developed Versailles. And in terms of mixing a Versailles, I mean, you could. I have my students work with black, white, and umber. Now, if you mix black and white, you get a very cool, almost bluish Versailles layer over a red ground. Now, if you do white and umber, you get a cooler, almost greenish Versailles layer. So it sort of depends. It's just a matter of experimenting. And one thing that I found, throughout the years is that even in a painter's arsenal of techniques, you get exceptions all the time. I mean, I would love to just narrow it down to say Velasquez used this one technique, but the truth is they were using whatever they felt like at the time, and you know, it depends the subject too that they were working with. So okay, so I'm working here with the darker shade for the eyes, to model the eyes, and start thinking in terms of form around the eyes. And again, this brush is just wonderful. It gives you this beautiful effects. And over this ground is a dream. I mean, you could get some amazing results with this ground. I love it. It's an oil ground. And if you wanted to prepare your own oil ground like this, well, black, lead white with a little bit of chalk. I get my chalk from Kramer Pigments. And uh, a little bit of umber, a little bit of vine black, and you could mix everything with linseed oil and just apply with a palette knife and get an amazing brown. And look at how this color is starting to all blend in, and you're starting to get some very um, subtle turns of color. That's what I wanted to really demonstrate in this demo, his use of color. He models differently than Velasquez. He's using very smooth paint, and uh, he's letting the color, not so much the value, do the work here, the turning of the form. So go ahead, and right now I'm just really drawing with the brush, trying to get this, at least just show you how I go about modeling something like this. Um, and this really will help define this alla prima style of Rubens probably a little bit better. I mean, Rubens is a very able painter. He's just an amazing draftsman. And in this painting, he's just shining like the star he was. I mean, he's just attacking this painting of his daughter. He's just such an amazing work. And that's what I'm going to do here. I'm really just taking that approach, just an alla prima approach to it. And the brush, the right brush for the job is this indeed, this large sable, which just puts the color on there like a dream. And the colors really do help. Now let's just bring out some black and white. It's what I'm using for the eyes, around the eyes. And that just gives you the perfect gray for go a little bit lighter. And even, I mean, I'm just leaving the gray of the ground right now, and it's even helping me, just really set this up. So let's just go ahead and hit those lips with a little bit of madder, and the madder like is really the standard pigment to paint lips. I mean, just about every chemical analysis that they do of every lip that was ever painted during the Renaissance is either red ochre or madder lake and uh, vermilion. So let's just go ahead and hit that. Probably a little bit more madder lake. And using some of that same color, reddish color underneath and the underneath plane, just to give it a little bit of, and then it'll settle color down. And I'm going to bring that color a little bit mixed with a little bit of burnt sienna for this reddish shadow right here, just to get harmonies. And I'm going to bring that same color around the eyes right here, eyes right here. Okay. Okay. So lip white and vermilion for the bottom lip. It's such a subtle touch. And a little bit of Venetian red. And I'm just laying in the color to just laying the color. I imagine all the millions of decisions that Rubens made in this painting, and setting it up again. It's just a lot of work. So much fun though, this painting. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and just set this up really quickly in the background, okay? With the white, the colors, just to frame the face and make this a little bit more dynamic composition. And the large brush, the large sable brush really will help me do that. This brush is just amazing. And I believe that Rubens indeed was probably using something like this. I mean, the painting just seems to have such a, and he just drags out white. He just sort of, I think he just probably just, this is the stack process let white. And this white is just stellar. Like when you thin it down, it just gives you the most amazing turbid medium effect, which is the gray, sort of a gray color. What I'll do is I'll just finish work on this, and then on my live next week, I'll just show you the end result. For now, let's just try to get as much of it done. I'm going to hit the highlights here. And again, once there's a couch of paint on there, these pigments are just singing because they're really designed for impasto. Just okay. And again, let's just hit this plane, this forehead plane. Side of the brush, and just bring up more light in the model. I'm going to go back to watching my brush. And let's create a little bit of an accent, dark accent, black and umber. And start bringing out some of the darks in the eye. Just for the sake of effect, just get this, try to get this to get the maximum done in the time during the live. So you can see this will have probably puts this gray color inside the eye. It's just really beautiful. This is just an issue of drawing. This is just drawing with a brush. Let's work on the hair for the hair. I'm going to work on this with this large brush. This will allow me to give me that texture of the hair. This is a fresco brush, and it's a wonderful brush. It's in black and once you have enough paint on there, the fresco brush really blends the color quite nicely, and you can even do this effect of the hair that Rubens did, and he has all over his paintings. So a little bit of Lenten Yellow right there. Get the effect of the hair. Lenten Yellow and that white. Let's work on this transition a little bit. Run the brush right along. To get that smoothness that Rubens gets. Probably just running the brush along the planes and getting that color, beautiful color. Okay. So I'm about to tie this up. And again, I mean, this is just using Rubens' palette and using his techniques, using the gray ground that he used that was typical of his style, and working with a very quick underdrawing and just setting up the colors. Now I'm going to go ahead and work this painting for, I imagine that he worked this probably for 3 or 4 hours. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing, and trying to bring it to the finish as quickly as possible. I'm only going to use one session on this one painting. You could imagine, this same sort of approach. This painting was done in one session and with a very quick objective style like I'm using here, but the palette changes. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. And again, if there's any questions, now would be the time to ask those questions. Anything about pigments. Now, all these pigments were hand ground using a stone mauler. Um, they're historical pigments. That's exactly what I'm using here. I'm using historical brushes, historical mediums, to sort of recreate this technique of Rubens from his later period, not his so much his early um, style. So, anyways, if there's any questions to answer, okay. So, thank you again for joining me in this presentation. And next week, I will be back with a more elaborate demo, and I will be continuing my series of Old Master techniques, and I will revisit some of these techniques. Now, it's important to mention before I go that Rubens also worked on panel. He was a painter that worked both on canvas and on large panels, and he prepared a chalk and glue panel with a streaky imprimatura, and I have a video here in the channel that describes that technique, and he details the whole process. So check it out. I believe it's under historical painting techniques. There's a demo there, and if you have any questions, just write to me, a personal message on the channel. Anyways, I hope that you've enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much for your support, and I hope to see you next week. Make sure to log on to luisborreroart.com to check out my live online classes with a structured curriculum. So again, these are technical notes, quick technical notes, just to introduce students to the techniques. So again, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy your night and be safe.